Again here this cartoon also shows the same thing. You have a turbo, air coming in, and then the compressed air passes through air cooler, then it goes in, the exhaust then goes to the turbo. So, turbocharger, and this is the supercharger. In the supercharger, the belt drives the engine, and here you have a screw compressor, and then the air comes in. Statements by big people. Difference. The compressor in superchargers are driven by power taken directly from the engine, whereas in a turbocharger the exhaust gases are used. Since the supercharger draws mechanical energy from the engine, it is less efficient when compared to turbocharger, because turbocharger is not drawing any power, it is using only the waste heat of exhaust gas. Okay. With this advantage of turbochargers over superchargers, the former was used where the fuel economy is concerned. Oh, for example, if you are buying a car, fuel economy is your main concern. So, you will always be driving a car with turbocharger on, not the supercharger. Okay. But if you are driving a sports car, Formula 1 car, you do not worry about fuel economy, because you just want to win the race, and therefore, you will use superchargers. So, superchargers are employed in sports car, which are meant for faster speeds and not for fuel economy. Suppose you want a Ferrari, Ferrari will most likely be using supercharger compared to turbocharger. Secondly, a supercharger is easier to control in terms of power output, while the turbochargers are known for their dramatic rise in pressure and tremendously high working temperature, making them inherently more difficult to control at time when they deliver the additional power. So, turbochargers are more difficult to control compared to superchargers. Okay. So, turbochargers are a difficult ball game. Yes. Supercharger increases the fuel consumption because supercharger is drawing the power output from the shaft. Yeah. Well, I think you can replace that statement with chargers. So, generally when you have using chargers, so the previous statement was in the context of fuel efficiency. So, if you use any charger, whether it is supercharger or turbochargers, the engine will be more efficient compared to naturally aspirated. However, in this case when you are using superchargers you are mainly interested in faster speeds. So, what it is saying is, it is not saying that it is poor economy. What it is saying is that in case of engines where economy is the main concern, you go for turbochargers. Where economy is not the main concern, power is the output is the main concern, there you go for supercharger. It is not saying that supercharger is less efficient or it consumes more fuel. It is saying that superchargers are employed in sports car which are meant for faster speeds, but not better economy. That it does not mean that it will not give more economy, it may or may not, depending on the tuning, depending on the optimization. Okay. But the turbocharger will definitely be more efficient compared to naturally aspirated. Okay. Now, there is one important concept that I would like to tell you, and it is a major difference between the supercharger and turbocharger is, the important difference between the two is that since the supercharger is driven directly by the engine through the belt, the response of the same is pretty instantaneous. Engine speed increases, the supercharger speed will increase. Engine speed reduces, the supercharger speed will reduce. But on the other hand, the turbocharger is not the same. In case of turbocharger, it is driven by the exhaust gas. So, now if you increase the engine speed, the hot and high pressure air will go in, it will increase the turbine speed, turbine will increase the compressor speed, and then the boost will be coming to the air. So, when you increase the speed, you need actually instantaneous extra boost, but it is not provided, because now the exhaust has to become more hot, it has to reach the turbine, and the turbine speed has to increase, then the compressor speed has to increase, compressor has to compress to a higher pressure and temperature, and then the exhaust gas comes in. So, there is a time delay in this entire cycle, it is not positively connected. So, this delay is called turbo lag. On the other hand, turbochargers exhaust gas control the drive, and hence the system takes a bit of time before it reaches the operating speed after opening the throttle, which is referred to as turbo lag. Okay. It is not so, turbo lag is not such a big problem in case of small engines, but turbo lag is a big problem in case of large engines. I will tell you a very simple example. Most often than not, you must have travelled by train, right, and you must have seen that diesel engine is coming, diesel locomotive is coming into the station, and then the train slows down, and suppose the train has slowed down more than what is desired. So, then the driver, what it does is it presses the accelerator or it pulls the throttle, and then it tries to give it more power, but at that time what you notice is that huge amount of black cloud of smoke goes up in the air, right, and then after say 5 seconds or 10 seconds there is no black smoke coming out, only for that 10 seconds that extra smoke comes out. After that diesel engine locomotive becomes cleaner. Why is it happening? It is happening because now you see the demand, the power demand the driver has put. So, he has pulled the notch, it is called notch. So, basically when he pulls the notch, he is putting more amount of fuel in, but there is not enough amount of air available because he has already put the throttle down. So, the air is not available, but he is putting more amount of fuel. It will not burn efficiently, it will not burn very completely, and therefore, lot of soot production will take place, and the air will become hot, and then the air goes into the turbine, then the intake air pressure is increased, then the hot air, more amount of hot air at high pressure is given to the intake, and this whole thing takes about 10 seconds. So, for that 10 second you are actually continuing to put in more amount of fuel, and that is why you see a black plume of smoke coming out. After 10 seconds, since you have put in more amount of air, the combustion is complete and it does not really emit lot of pollutants. So, this turbo lag actually makes us feel that diesel engines are dirty, particularly the public perception about diesel engine is dirty because of this turbo lag, especially in locomotives. But when the locomotive engine is running at 100 km per hour or 50 km per hour and constant speed, you will not be able to see the smoke coming out of the engines. So, this is one bad example that is created by the turbo lag. Then the complexity in design is another factor, and in this point turbochargers takes the lead. It is better with its compactness and requires significantly less space compared to supercharger. In contrast, a supercharger is more difficult to adopt in a car, and modification is too time consuming as more space is needed for the same. So, it is easier to fit a car with a turbocharger compared to a supercharger. Expensiveness of the two is quite differentiating, with the supercharger being the more costly one than a conventional turbocharger. It is more expensive because of the use of expensive gearbox, because otherwise the compressor part has cost the same. Nowadays, all vehicles having either supercharger or turbochargers are intercooled, since the temperature of the compressed incoming air is high and intercooler is used to cool this air, making it more efficient in terms of combustion. Okay. So, turbochargers are less expensive, superchargers are more expensive and more voluminous. Now, we need to consider the factors when running a turbocharger. First factor that we need to consider is detonation, premature detonation. The premature detonation or knock occurs when the fuel air mixture detonates early due to pressure and temperature in the cylinder. This has to be avoided as it can seriously damage the engine. And how this can be avoided? By either reducing the pressure boost or reducing the temperature of the intake air, or by changing the spark timing. Fuel octane rating. Turbo engine benefits with higher octane fuel as they are less susceptible to knock. So, if you are using high octane number of fuel, you do not have to worry so much about knocking, and you can go on boosting the engine, and you can get more benefit of boosting. Okay. Water injection. Water injection adds moisture to the incoming air fuel charge and limits the chances of premature detonation. So, this can also be done. And then the compression ratios. Because turbo puts in greater volume of mixture into the engine, they often require a lower compression ratio in order to reduce the stress of the engine and chances of damage. See, by turbocharging what you are doing, suppose the engine is 17 compression ratio. By turbocharging, the effective compression ratio is increased. Suppose you have boosted it 1.5 times, the effective compression ratio will be much higher than 17. Okay. So, what you can, if you are boosting the engine, what you can do is actually you can have a lower compression ratio engine. And once you have a lower compression ratio engine, you can boost it, and effective compression ratio of the engine will be in the same range that you desire. Okay. And the boost level, while some engines are designed to handle very high boost levels, most non-turbo engines are not. So, if you are having a naturally aspirated engine, it is not designed to withstand very high pressures. Therefore, it is a good idea to use lower boost levels with engine that are not originally designed for a turbo. If you have designed it for a turbocharging, then of course you can go for higher boosting. Now you see, this is, I think, one of the last slides, and I would like you to give your attention to this. See, this one curve you have to understand. This y axis is torque, okay, and x axis is engine speed. This number 1 is downsized engine. I told you downsized engine and naturally aspirated engine. Suppose you have, this is your original engine, number 5 is your original engine, which is called a large displacement engine. Now you have a large displacement engine, say 3 liter engine, you want to displace it with half weight, half volume engine, 1.5 liter. So, this is the half volume engine, but this is operating in naturally aspirated mode, this is also operating in naturally aspirated mode. So, you can see that this downsized engine will give you very low torque when it is operated in naturally aspirated mode. This is the engine that you want to displace. So, now the question is how to make this engine operate at this level. How do you do that? So, what you can do is if you turbocharge this engine, conventional turbocharging, just bolt on turbocharger, then this torque level will now increase to this blue level. Okay. So, blue level means what? That engine will not give you very high torque at low speed, but it will give you very high torque at high speed. Please listen to me, then questions I will take. Okay. So, this is the conventional turbocharging. Now, what we want is that this should be able to displace this engine. So, that means we should be able to produce the same amount of torque even at low speeds. So, how do we do that? Then what we do is we use something called variable geometry turbine, VGT. So, basically in this variable geometry turbine, in the turbine the vane angles can be actually controlled. So, once you do that, your performance, your torque performance at low speeds also improves, but still you have not reached that level. It improves from the conventional one, but not reached at that level. And then if you use VGT with motor assist, that means in the beginning more variable geometry turbine with some assistance from another compressor which is driven by the engine, you are able to meet this. So, now you can see red curve and the blue curve, the black curve are at the same level. The red curve is from the downsized engine and the black curve is naturally aspirated large engine. Okay. So, this is how a engine which is of large size, 3 liter size, can be displaced by 1.5, 1.8 liter engine, and torque characteristics can be similar. So, this exercise is called torque curve shaping. So, the objective is to achieve torque curve shape of a downsized engine that is equivalent to a large displacement naturally aspirated engine. So, this is the naturally aspirated downsized engine, this is the naturally aspirated large engine, and we want to displace this engine with this engine in terms of torque speed characteristics. Starting with naturally aspirated downsized engine, it is relatively straightforward to achieve the required torque characteristic from about rated torque speed, this is the rated torque speed, to the maximum rated speed of the engine using conventional turbocharging technology. So, here you can match using conventional turbocharged technology. It is apparent that at engine speeds below rated torque speed, below this speed, the challenge is considerably greater because you are not able to go up to that level. So, while the VGT helps, there is still, when you use VGT, it is helping, but it is still not reaching. There is still considerable torque deficit at low speeds, you are not able to match it. So, providing some external assistance to turbocharger, in this case via a motor connected to a turbocharger shaft, is one of the ways to generate additional boost required to overcome this torque deficit. So, you can connect another motor and make the turbine and turbocharger operate faster, that is the motor assist, and once you do that, you are able to match. So, this shows the principle of providing some external power assist to turbocharger at low speeds to improve steady state full power torque. So, this is how the downsizing and the torque curve shaping can be done. It is not necessary that you have to always do this motor assist, it depends on what kind of downsizing you are looking at. If you are looking at a downsizing of only 20%, conventional turbocharging is more than sufficient. But if you are looking at 30%, 40%, then you have to go for VGT turbo boosting. If you are looking at 50%, then possibly motor assist. Yes, what is the question? Is it clear now? Any questions? Well, it depends on another stage of turbine and compressor is used in the engines which are very large. Okay. Normally, you know, you do not do that in small engines. Up to locomotive size, only one stage is enough, but when you go to ship engines which are, for example, 80 megawatt engines. So, there what happens is that the volumes of the volume flow rates that you are dealing with, and also the power outputs that you are dealing with are more. So, there you go for multi-stage turbocharging. The boosting requirement is also very high. You can go up to 3 bar boosting, 2.5 bar boosting. Okay, so, there you need multi-stage turbocharging. But in most of the applications, for example, car applications, for locomotive applications, you only need like 1.5 bar. I have heard only like in most of the applications for trucks, 1.5 is what is the max boosting that I have heard of. That means the intake air pressure of 2.5 bar. More than that is only used in the ships, but not in other applications. Okay. So, this is the compound supercharged turbocharged engine. So, here you see this is the engine, exhaust is passing through a turbine, then you have intercooler, then you have another roots blower or turbocharger, and then it is going. So, basically this is the compounding of turbocharging and supercharging. So, that is why it is called compound supercharged and turbocharged, both are used. Okay. So, now the final slide is that still we do not have an answer, which one is better, should we go for turbocharger or should we go for supercharger. It is a very difficult question which the designer has to answer depending on what is the requirement. For example, if you are designing a Formula 1 car or a sports car, you can probably go for supercharging. If you are designing a car which you are expecting to compete in the market and meet the targets, CAFE norms, fuel efficiency, fuel economy norms, CAFE norms are called, these are called, which are related to fuel economy. So, if you are going for vehicles which have to comply with CAFE norms, then you have to go for turbocharging. You certainly cannot go for supercharging. Okay. So, it depends on the application of the vehicle or whether it is for stationary application or construction machine or ship, depending on that you will take a call. Okay. Gasoline direct injection engines. Okay. So, as you know, this is a gasoline engine, but traditionally if you look at the gasoline engines, most of the gasoline engines are carbureted engines. Okay. Carbureted engines were very popular ever since Otto cycle was invented by Nicholas Otto, and carburetor was used for running these engines until 1970s or 1980s. After 1980s, it was when the emission norms came into the picture. Emission norms came into the picture around 1972, first time in California. Okay. And then you see, after that it was thought that you need a better control on fuel air mixture in gasoline engines. So, this system called multi-point port fuel injection, okay, or electronic fuel injection was introduced. So, in multi-point port fuel injection, I have already taught this to you. The fuel is injected in the inlet port. Okay, so, the mixture is still prepared outside the cylinder, and this is the valve. So, this is in the inlet manifold where you prepare the fuel air mixture, and this became a norm for the gasoline engine. Most of the engines that are produced even today in the world are running on PFI technology, MPFI technology. Okay. But then this gives you very high power, reasonably good economy, reasonable emissions, but then you see now we are making the emission norms more and more stringent. Okay. So, it was thought that maybe this technology is also not good enough. So, can we really advance this technology one notch higher? So, then it was thought that okay, let us develop a technology where we prepare the fuel air mixture right inside the cylinder. So, gasoline injection, this gasoline direct injection engine was invented, and this technology, Mitsubishi is one of the largest leaders in GDI technology. Of course, other car manufacturers also have developed some or the other variations of GDI technology. Here you see the engine is fitted with an injector which is injecting the fuel directly in the cylinder, just like in a diesel engine. So, that is why it is called gasoline direct injection. Okay. And this after 2000, most of the cars in developed world are now fitted with GDI technology. Now, you ask me what is the advantage? The advantage of GDI technology is that it is very fuel efficient. It is about 30% higher fuel efficiency compared to this. So, suppose you have a car which is running and giving you 12 kilometers per liter. If it is a GDI engine, it will give you 15 kilometers or 16 kilometers per liter. So, it is a significant advantage in terms of fuel economy. Okay. And also it has significant advantage in terms of emissions. So, this particular technology is very efficient in terms of lower emissions as well. Okay. So, these are the advantages, and this is how the technology has progressed with time. Gasoline engine technology has progressed with time. Okay. So, if you look at ever since the engines were designed, the engine designers were seeking to improve the fuel efficiency in an endeavor to meet the environmental demands such as energy conservation, because the fossil fuels are depleting, and reduction of CO2 emissions because of the pressure on greenhouse gas emission norms, okay, to limit the negative impact of the greenhouse gas. So, nowadays you must have heard about COP21, COP21, which was adopted in Paris environmental deal. So, there also it was thought that from the automotive sector also we should try to put lesser amount of CO2 per kilometer of vehicle travel. So, this technology comes quite handy because you are able to extract more mileage out of the same amount of fuel. So, that means per kilometer travel you are actually burning lesser amount of fuel, and since you are burning lesser amount of fuel, you are also producing lesser amount of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So, it is a very efficient technology that way. Demand to design and build ever more efficient engines has led to development of GDI engines. For years, automotive engineers have believed this type of engine has the greatest potential to optimize fuel supply and also to optimize the combustion. Okay. But it was not possible because gasoline has poor combustibility. Okay. Its auto ignition temperature is very high, its combustion is difficult to control, and that is why it was not possible to put the fuel directly in the cylinder. But with the advent of microprocessors with the integration of sensors and microprocessors and very efficient fuel injection systems, which could deal with this problem, it was possible to develop the GDI engine. GDI engine could be developed only after all these sensors etc., were a norm in the automotive sector. Okay. So, this gives you superior performance and lower fuel consumption. Presently, an in-cylinder direct injection for the use of production vehicles has been designed, and this advanced GDI engine is the realization of an engineering dream, because automotive engineers always thought that we can inject the gasoline directly in the cylinder, and it was not, they could not do it. So, this was a long cherished dream for automotive engineers. For years, engineers have known that if they could build a petrol engine that worked like a diesel engine, in other words, in which the fuel is injected directly in the cylinder and stratified, okay, rich mixtures right near the spark plug is ignited, they would have an engine that achieved both high fuel efficiency of the diesel engine and attained high power output of a conventional gasoline engine. So, what is done here is that you are actually injecting the fuel in the cylinder. Now, when you are injecting the fuel in the cylinder, you are doing it such a way that you form different strata of different air fuel mixture. So, that means very close to the spark plug you have combustible mixture. I told you that every fuel burns only when the air fuel mixture is within the flammability limit, between the upper flammability limit and lower flammability limit. If it is richer than upper flammability limit, then it won't burn. If it is leaner than lower flammability limit, it will not burn. Okay. So, you have to make sure that when the fuel goes into the combustion chamber, when it comes close to the spark plug, there is a flammability limit, flammable mixture present in that vicinity. That is one point. The second point is that if suppose you are able to create a fuel free environment around it, right, then what will happen? You will be burning only that small quantity of fuel, right. If you look at the why, if you look at it from the combustion point of view, why the diesel engines are more efficient and why the gasoline engines are not so efficient. One, of course, is thermodynamic reason is because diesel engines are using higher compression ratio. But from combustion point of view, if you look at, you are injecting the fuel in a diesel engine and the spray is coming out, and those sprays are catching fire. We have seen all those view graphs, right. So, when the diesel engine operates at part load or low load condition, you inject very small quantity of fuel. So, only that small amount of air is used, the remaining combustion chamber there is just air. So, you do not worry about it whether the air is totally utilized or not. In case of gasoline engine, what you are doing? In case of gasoline engine, you have to prepare homogeneous mixture of fuel and fuel air mixture outside the cylinder. So, now what is the flammability limit for homogeneous mixture? 12 to 18. So, that means when the fuel air mixture has to come in, entire cylinder has to be filled with this homogeneous mixture. So, even when you are operating at part load condition, you have to still fill between 12 and 18, and you do not need power. So, you are wasting that much fuel. You can manage with a very small quantity of fuel, but you have to fill in the entire thing with homogeneous fuel air mixture, because if you make it lean, it will not burn, it will not even idle. So, idling efficiency, part load efficiency of homogeneous engine, which is whether it is carbureted or port fuel injected, it is extremely bad. On the other hand, if you make it gasoline direct injection, now what you do in gasoline direct injection, you do not have to make it homogeneous, you can make it stratified. So, that means when there is part load condition, you do not need so much fuel energy to be released, you inject very small quantity and make the mixture very close to the spark plug. Only that part will burn, remaining area there is hardly any fuel. So, you will be able to have very high efficiency, because at low load and part load condition, idling condition, you are putting very small quantity of fuel in the combustion chamber. You do not have to fill entire combustion chamber with fuel air mixture, which is homogeneous and within combustible limits. You just have to make homogeneous combustible mixture very close to the spark plug. So, maybe 1/5 or 1/6 of the volume. That is what makes it very, very efficient. Okay. So, now from combustion standpoint, is it clear?
how the gasoline engine is different from diesel engine and how GDI engine is different from carbureted or port fuel injection engine and why it becomes more efficient. Diesel engines operate on a thermodynamic cycle, meaning that as long as sufficient temperature is achieved, thorough ignition will occur regardless of the air fuel mixture condition. Now, if you look at diesel engine, what is the air fuel ratio range? When you are operating at idling, the overall air fuel mixture can be as high as 100. If you are running at full load, the overall air fuel mixture can be as low as 20, but still it is less than stoichiometric, it is leaner than stoichiometric. Why? Because you are not making homogeneous. I mean, even at 20, the diesel engine will start putting out objectionable smoke, because you do not have enough time for mixing of fuel and air mixture inside the combustion chamber, and there will be some zones where there will be excess of fuel, which is basically the core of the spray, and there you will form particulates. Okay. So, in case of gasoline engine, the air fuel mixture has to be within 12 to 18 air fuel ratio. Okay. So, in order to achieve combustion with gasoline or gaseous fuels, air must be mixed to form just the right mixture. Just the right mixture means air fuel ratio 12 to 18, and precise control of position and timing of the air fuel mixture is necessary to ensure delivery of this mixture to the very limited space between the spark plug electrodes in a very specific timing of the ignition. GDI engine is able to achieve all this, very precise mixture condition at the right time when you are about to ignite the spark. It achieves all this through Mitsubishi technology. As I told you, Mitsubishi is the leader automotive OEM which has developed and mastered this technology. In fact, now all the vehicles of Mitsubishi are fitted with GDI engines that enables precise control of the air fuel mixture. Of course, GDI technology addresses lot of environmental issues. So, first is it addresses the global issue. What is the global issue? CO2, greenhouse gas emissions. It also addresses local issues. Is the greenhouse gas emissions. Local issue means it will control the HC emissions, CO emissions that are coming out. Very low HC and CO and NOx emissions come out of it. The combustion of an engine that uses hydrocarbon as fuel is a process in which fuel is converted into carbon dioxide. So, fuel is getting converted into carbon dioxide. A viable solution for reducing the amount of CO2 emissions is by improving the efficiency of the vehicles. If you improve the efficiency, the mileage goes up and you are using lesser amount of fuel per kilometer of vehicle travel, and therefore, you are putting lesser amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. In order to preserve the local environment in urban areas, it is important to reduce the levels of HC, CO and NOx emissions which are emitted, and GDI engine is able to do that very, very precisely. Now, if you look at the challenge of reducing CO2 emissions and the advantage of GDI technology in reducing the CO2 emissions. So, lowering CO2 emissions demands a global outlook. Global outlook means what? It means that when you say CO2 emissions, are you just going to look at the emissions from the fuel combustion only, or you need to have a little broader perspective? Global perspective means you really have a broader perspective, because you have to understand that when you are manufacturing any engine, you are using materials, metals, plastics. How metals and plastics are made? How they are mined, right? They are processed, they are machined. In all these processes, you are using energy. In order to generate that energy, you are putting CO2 into the atmosphere, right. So, there may be a technology which is very efficient, which gives very little amount of CO2 into the atmosphere, but when you are making that machine, it is huge machine, it requires lot of material, more material. So, therefore, during the manufacturing stage, you are putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. So, it may be possible that the technology which is looking very attractive, because it is giving per kilometer lesser amount of CO2, may actually not be if you are looking globally, because you might have put in more CO2 into the atmosphere during the production stage. And if the machine is big and it has 15 years life, after 15 years what are you going to do? You are going to recycle it, right. everything has to be recycled. So, when you recycle it, again you are putting in lot of energy into the atmosphere. So, that also needs to be taken. So, cradle to grave analysis has to be done for every technology in order to see that okay, right from starting stage to the end stage, this is the amount of CO2 I have put in and this many kilometers the technology worked. Okay. So, then you get a final realistic idea about the CO2 that you are putting in per kilometer of vehicle travel, right. So, we must focus on reducing emissions starting from the production stage through to the end of the vehicle's life. Some technology, while enabling major CO2 emission reduction during combustion, involve higher than usual output during production and recycling. Okay. This results in an increase in total emissions over the life of the vehicle, and it may not look very attractive, otherwise it was looking very attractive. The GDI engine does not necessitate major alterations in the existing production processes. The beauty of the GDI engine is that this is exactly like conventional engine, no extra hardware required. So, that means in the production stage some tweaking is required, some designs may change, but that does not necessarily mean that you are putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. So, GDI engine does not necessitate major alterations in the existing production processes. Production stage CO2 emissions are fundamentally the same for conventional petrol engines. Okay. Moreover, with the GDI engines, CO2 emissions at the recycling stage are also on par with those of the conventional petrol engine. So, during the production and during the recycling, CO2 emissions are almost same. So, now what it means? It means that any reduction in on-road fuel requirement will thus translate directly into reduction of total CO2 output. Okay. This view graph will make it more clear. This tells you total CO2 emission during the life of the vehicle, life of the vehicle engine. We are talking only about the engine technology. So, this is the base vehicle. Okay. CO2 emitted during the use. This is the CO2 emitted during the use, this is the CO2 emitted during the production, and this is the CO2 emitted during recycling, right. Now, GDI engine, we know that GDI is more fuel efficient, it gives you better mileage. So, during the same usage, it will give you lesser amount of CO2. It will have the same amount of CO2 during production, it will have the same amount of CO2 emitted during the recycling. So, this turns out to be more environment friendly. There may be another technology, I will not name the technology right now, but there are many technologies which may look very attractive, because during the usage they may put in very less amount of CO2, but they may require extra hardware. Engine is heavy, or there are some extra equipment or extra accessories that are required. So, extra heavy equipment, extra heavy hardware, that means production stage you will have more CO2 being put into the atmosphere. During the recycling also, heavier system will put in more amount of CO2 into the atmosphere. So, you can see that another new technology hypothetically looks very attractive here if we look at this in isolation, but actually it may not turn out to be efficient in terms of CO2 emissions. Okay. Whereas, this GDI technology, since it is using same type of hardware, looks quite attractive. Okay. Now, this is just a old view graph, but you can see that GDI technology was invented by Mitsubishi around 1996. This is the GDI equipped car among the cars that were manufactured by GDI. So, from 1996 to 1998 or so, already within 3 years time, they replaced all the gasoline engines with gasoline direct injection engine, MPFI engines with GDI engines, 70%. By 2000, this 70% became 85%. And by 2010, not even a single car is manufactured with PFI technology by Mitsubishi. All the cars are fitted with GDI technology. Okay. Now, this shows how much CO2 reduction they could achieve. So, 1995, by 2000 they could achieve 15% reduction in CO2 emissions, and around 20% is what they have achieved so far. 20% CO2 emission reduction is quite substantial, cannot be ignored. Okay. So, now more and more manufacturers are taking up the GDI technology, and now there are many manufacturers which are adopting to this technology. Unfortunately, in India, we have missed many buses, like we have missed silicon bus, not even a single IC is made in India. Same way we have also missed in automotive technology, we have also missed GDI bus. Not even a single manufacturer OEM in India is making GDI engines, which we should be making. Now people are waking up, and now they are trying to develop the technology in house or collaborate with others. Okay. In fact, the only research engine of GDI is in IIT Kanpur in this country. Nobody else has a research engine for GDI technology. Okay. So, let us look at the emissions. So, I think this view graph is just to show you on the one axis you have NOx, on the other axis you have HC. This is Japanese norm, this is European norm, this is FTP norm, okay, basically the American norm. And what it shows is, it is a rectangle. So, what it shows is that with increasing emission norms, we are actually moving towards the origin. These rectangles are getting smaller and smaller. This is a little dated slide. So, this was around 1995, this was 2000, and it became even smaller. Here this is tier 1, then ultra low emission vehicle, then super ultra low emission vehicle, ULEV, SULEV, LEV. There are many emission norms. So, basically you are moving in towards the origin. What it really means is that you have made emission norms where you permit the vehicles to emit lesser and lesser quantity of NOx, lesser and lesser quantity of HC and CO, and also particulate matter. These are the 4 regulated emissions: HC, CO, NOx and PM, and all of them have to be reduced. And it is a big problem for automotive designers and R&D guys to meet those numbers. Why it is very difficult, I will tell you. I have already discussed this, that NOx formation in the engine is a function of temperature. Higher will be the temperature in the peak temperature in the combustion chamber, more will be the NOx formation. Okay? And particulate formation happens because of the incomplete combustion. So, higher will be the temperature, more and more complete combustion you will have, right. So, higher will be the temperature, lower will be the particulate matter. Now, it is double-edged sword. You take some action that will either reduce the temperature or it will increase the temperature. If it increases the temperature, whatever action you take, if that increases the temperature in the combustion chamber, soot will come down, but the NOx will go up. If you reduce the peak temperature in the combustion chamber, NOx will come down, but the soot will go up. So, this is a typical catch-22 situation. You try to control one, the other will go out of hand. And this is typically called soot-NOx trade-off in IC engine parlances. Soot-NOx trade-off, you try to control one, the other one will go off. And this is a big problem for automotive manufacturers. And then the emission norms, all these government regulatory bodies, they are saying that, okay, if you are controlling one, it does not mean the other can go up. Both have to be controlled. You have to come towards the origin in order to clean up your emissions. Okay, both are bad and both have to be controlled. So, now what people do is they try to control one emission in the combustion, during the combustion stage, allow the other one to go up. Obviously, it will go up because of the nature of combustion. So, suppose you are controlling NOx primarily. So, NOx you control during combustion by bringing down the temperature. So, particulate will go up. Particulate you control by after treatment. So, you put some kind of a diesel particulate filter or some device by which you kill the particulate before it goes out. Or you can do that for the NOx. You can achieve high temperature inside the combustion chamber. Particulates will be killed in the combustion chamber itself and kill the NOx in the exhaust gas after treatment. So, I will discuss all those things, all those topics also in detail in my later lectures. But this just I wanted to show you that how the emission norms are progressing. And GDI technology actually is quite efficient in terms of reducing both NOx, HC and PM and CO. So, Mitsubishi has continued to conduct R&D for the technology for cleaner exhaust emissions. Particular focus has been on the development of new technical features that will reduce the NOx and HC emissions by more than 80% without impairing the engine efficiency. without affecting the engine efficiency, they are able to reduce the HC and NOx. These new technical features include an earlier activation of the catalyst by two-stage combustion. I will discuss that in detail. What is this two-stage combustion? This was a feature which is made possible by GDI's precise control of formation of air fuel mixture. So, GDI, as I told you, it has a injector which is solenoid control, which is controlled by a ECU, and you can very precisely control what should be the fuel air mixture strength and at what time you have to form that, and you can do it in a much more efficient manner compared to what you can do in a PFI engine, and because of this you are able to achieve two-stage combustion. Also, you have another intervention which is called reactive type exhaust manifold. So, reactive type exhaust manifold means it allows the exhaust to slow down, and at high temperature it allows them to stay there for some time. So, during that time the secondary combustion reactions or heat release reactions get completed, okay, which maximizes the effect, and the EGR. So, it uses very high volume EGR. EGR is to control the NOx emissions, and then whatever NOx is left by in spite of having EGR, you are having lean NOx catalyst in the after treatment system. So, first of all you produce less NOx, and then whatever is left you kill it before it gets out by using the lean NOx catalyst. I will discuss all these things, and I will tell you how we are able to achieve very low emission levels from GDI engines. These features will be integrated in most effective practical manner possible, ensuring that GDI continues to comply with the environmental requirements worldwide. Okay. Now, I will just tell you, between 1995 to 2000, the problem of the emissions and the kind of world we are going to live in 10 or 15 years, it was realized. Many technologies were developed, many new out of the box technologies were developed, and vehicles were developed commercially. So, these include basically the GDI technology, and then EVs were also developed around 1995 or so. Hybrid vehicles also came around 2000, and now 2003-4 fuel cell vehicles came. But you see, technologies are developed 1995 to 2000, 2000 to 2010, and the width of this shows the number of vehicles that are sold. So, you can see that electrical vehicles are a very niche market, very small market. Hybrid vehicles also have very small market because of the cost issues. Hybrid vehicles are about twice as expensive as GDI or gasoline vehicles. Fuel cell vehicles are of course very small because of the cost issues. I told you the numbers are like this car is going to cost you about 100 times a normal car, okay. And GDI on the other hand is almost the same price. There is no extra pricing compared to a PFI car, and you can see it has penetrated very well in the market, okay. So, the number of the vehicles, GDI seems to be one of the very successful technology change that has taken place in last 15-20 years.